are you doing?
Great, Kirti. So, welcome all the viewers who have come here to watch this video. Today, we have Kirti Sivakoti with us. She's from United States and she's a pediatrician and an very enthusiastic advocate for ADHD. I believe more than a professional, she is also personally very much inclined towards this topic. She has witnessed this concept of ADHD in her personal life, and now she has made it a mission in her life to help people who are either uh, a part of ADHD industry or the people who are suffering from ADHD or the people who have other people around who have ADHD. So she understands this as a concept from the grassroots level, and let's now listen it from her and understand what exactly it is, how is it caused, how ADHD people are different from other people, how can it be cured, and either anybody can have it and what are the symptoms of it. So we'll have every knowledge around it. Let's listen from Kirti. So Kirti, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, Akshay. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Pleasure is all mine to have you on board with me and to have a discussion with you. So before we start, can we have a small introduction from your side that how did you choose to be such an enthusiast about ADHD? What brought you in this industry? What brought you to this field?
Yeah. So my journey, I'm a pediatrician and I live in United States. And during my pediatric career, I have seen children who have ADHD. And I learned a lot about it. And one common topic that kept coming up all the time is there are not enough resources. And there are so many parents there's a lot of myth and a lot of stigma around ADHD. A lot of parents think that it is a parenting problem. People think that you should discipline your child a lot better. It's a disciplining problem. Or kids who have ADHD themselves, they start getting low self-esteem because they think that something is wrong with them, And they constantly have this thought that my teacher says I'm a bad student, my parents says that I can't focus, people around me say that I'm a bad child, but I don't have a problem in understanding things. I don't have a problem in understanding subjects. So it's just this dichotomy that's created, where on one side, kids know that they're smart. They can do projects really, really well. But on the other hand, it's their focus, their attention. And because of all of those factors, they're not able to use what they have. And because of that, fingers are pointed at them. Unfortunately, there are so many people who are misdiagnosed or are diagnosed otherwise with anxiety or depression, not recognizing that ADHD can be at the root of a lot of things. And it's just so common. There's so many myths about it. And surprisingly, I thought I knew about ADHD, but in my personal life, when I encountered with the challenges with executive functioning, with time blindness I think is a big one for me. And what time blindness really means is the now. The now is a lot more compelling than planning for the future or just understanding that there are other responsibilities. And what I mean is at work, I'm fine. When I'm in that professional mode, I do great. But when I'm home, when I'm relaxed, it comes on in the fact that, okay, I'm watching a video or I'm doing something, I'm talking to someone, and we'll go for hours and hours, not recognizing that I should be doing other things for the future as well. Unfortunately, that led to some personal life problems. And when I saw up close what time blindness can do to you, what executive function problems can do to you, that's when I started realizing, oh my God, there's so many people who are struggling with it. The impact is so enormous. If you look up research on impact of ADHD, it's so ginormous. And yet, there is so much stigma, so much myth around ADHD. The surprising thing is most of the people who talk about ADHD, that it's not real, it doesn't exist, are not the ones who are suffering from it. They're the ones who are looking from the outside. It kind of makes it ironical because somebody who's experiencing it, somebody whose brain works different behind the eyes, they know what they're suffering. They know what they're going through. And somebody else telling from the outside that what you're experiencing is not real. You just have a discipline problem. It's just a parenting problem. You just have to work harder to focus. I can't do it. If I could do it, I would have done it by now.
Absolutely. So only the
And
person who is actually going through it feels the pain what he or she is going through. Otherwise, they don't. Nobody else understand what exactly that person is going through.
exactly, nobody else understands. And it can get so depressing when, imagine if it is a child, if it's a 10-year-old, and he knows how his brain works. He knows that he's paying attention to 10 different things. He knows that he is impulsive and he can't do anything to control it, while people around him are pointing fingers that you should sit still, you should focus. Why can't you just work harder? It can get so frustrating, and no wonder there's so many kids who are anxious and depressed because of it.
I understand. So, Kirti, first question first. Like, how is this ADHD actually caused? Is it uh, can it be diagnosed in the early childhood days of a person, or it can be developed at the age of 15, 20, 25, 30, or is it a childhood thing, or person can develop it during his or her growth? So, what do you have to say about it?
So, fantastic question, Akshay. So, to answer that, another big myth. I just want to say another myth around ADHD is a lot of people think that, okay, this person is hyperactive. We're just calling every hyperactive kid as ADHD, which is absolutely not true. It's so
Okay.
far from the truth. There are diagnostic criteria that kids need to meet to be able to be diagnosed with ADHD. We just don't diagnose every hyperactive kid. I mean, we all have instances where we lose focus. We all have instances where we have a lot of energy and we want to be hyperactive. There are specific criteria. They're called DSM-5 criteria for the diagnosis. And the most important thing to diagnose ADHD is first, how chronic are the symptoms? The chronicity of symptoms is important. If it's something for 1 month, 2 months, somebody has been impulsive hyperactive, you can make the diagnosis. It has to be for at least 6 months or more.
Okay. So, in
Yep.
order to first go for a diagnosis, so let's say the viewers who are watching this video, they should understand this thing, that the symptoms of ADHD should be shown for at least 6 months to be declared it as a ADHD. Before that, it can be something else as well. So
Yeah.
that's
There
what
are
you're saying.
so many things. Exactly. There are so many things that can look like ADHD. One of the reasons why it is so important to seek professional help. And just to give you a summary, diagnostic criteria, they have to be at least for 6 months. And there are some questionnaires called Vanderbilt questionnaires, which I can actually post a link. But Vanderbilt questionnaires, they go through criteria on inattention. There are 9 questions on there. Criteria for hyperactivity, 9 questions. Impulsivity, the questions are there, and kids have to be positive for at least 6 out of the 9 questions. And people think that, why do I have to go through questionnaires and all of it? But when you go through questionnaires, it's very exhaustive and it's a lot more comprehensive compared to if you're just asking questions or talking to someone. That's the second thing, the questionnaires. The other thing to also remember is ADHD, the symptoms have to be present over 2 settings, at least 2 settings. What I
Two
mean is
settings
work
means?
and schools. So
Okay.
work, let's say work and home, or home and school. And the reason why it is very important is because there is a child who might be hyperactive at home, he might want to run around, or inattentive at home, but the moment he goes to school, he's paying attention. He's sitting
Okay.
down. He's doing things well. So he's not really being affected by it. I mean, he's not really struggling academically. He's doing just fine at school. So what that means is maybe when he's at home, there is lack of structure. There is, he feels free. He wants to do whatever he
Right,
wants to
right,
do.
right.
But it's not ADHD. And it's the same thing with work and home as well. Some people might be hyperactive at work, inattentive at work, because maybe the work is not something that they're liking. So it's hard
Right.
for them to pay attention. But
So
at
do you
home, they're doing just fine.
So do you mean to say that consistency has to be maintained in all the areas of life? So if a child
Correct.
is only showing symptom at one place, at one sphere of his or her life, then necessarily it's not sure that it's ADHD. It could be just the excitement part or the vulnerability part or the sad part or the happy part. But if that consistency is maintained at least in different spheres of life, like for example, school and work, or let's say work and a home, or let's say it can be for anybody. But I would also want you to put some light that is it like a person can develop with the increasing age, or is it from the childhood itself?
So it's a fantastic question. And the reason I say it is because most of ADHD, when you look at it, it's a genetic disorder. Most of it, it's a genetic problem. And there are specific areas of the brain that are affected when they have ADHD. In fact, I would like to, if that's okay, I can share my screen. And I wanted to show, yeah, so I actually
Okay.
have this article pulled up. So this article, I would strongly encourage people who are watching this to check out this article. And there's so many articles on the anatomic differences between somebody who has ADHD and somebody who doesn't have ADHD. So if you look at the picture of the brain, this is kind of a side view of the brain. So we have the frontal part of the brain here. We call that the frontal cortex, the prefrontal cortex. We have parietal temporal lobes, occipital lobes in the back. But most of ADHD problem comes from underdevelopment of the frontal cortex. So when the prefrontal cortex is underdeveloped, especially on the right side, it causes kids to have problems with executive functioning. And a lot of these kids are at least 2 to 3 years behind. So they might have problems as to organizing towards the future, as to planning towards the future. So it's the top to bottom kind of attention. If you look at this picture, the top down attention is what is affected the most, because this attention originates in the prefrontal cortex. It tells you that, okay, it's time for a test. You got to study for a test. You have to plan for that wedding, which is 2 months down the road. That's really, really hard. But there's another kind of attention, actually, it's called the bottom up, or attention that originates from areas of the brain that are not the prefrontal cortex. And those include things like you're paying attention to something that's loud and moving, video games, a protest going on, a lot of protests going on right now in the United States. So that kind of attention is typically not affected in ADHD unless they have some involvement of the parietal and temporal cortex as well. But the idea is there are major anatomical changes. People think that ADHD is just a cooked up thing, or it doesn't exist. But there are so many studies where MRI studies have been compared, and kids have lower volume of the prefrontal cortex.
Right. So what you're saying is that,
yeah, go ahead.
So what you're exactly saying is that majorly it's a genetic thing, that's first. Then second, obviously it is mostly in the cases of child only, and it is really hard to develop it as we grow, and maybe we have it since our birth only, so whosoever has it. And what you were saying is ADHD is a serious thing. It's not a joke, it's not a myth. So some people who actually don't believe it, that they just think that probably person is showing tantrums, person is not disciplined enough, person is not not listening to the instructions given by his or her parents or the school, but actually it is something related to brain as a structure as well, and it is very deep rooted from the body inside. That's what you're saying, right?
That is true. And there's just one addition I would like to make with regards to this being just a childhood disorder. That used to be the thought process. A lot of people used to think that it's only a childhood disorder, but now a lot of people are discovering that there are so many adults who have ADHD as well. Okay. And there are two different categories of people. With those anatomic changes, there are some kids who grow out of it because the prefrontal cortex is developing, their brain is developing, they're catching up. But on the other hand, there are some people where the brain anatomical changes, they're fixed, and that is their genotype. That is the way their brain is built, and they don't grow out of it. So in fact, there are so many adults who have ADHD. In fact, 90% of them are undiagnosed right now.
And they go through problems that they are going through the problem, but they are not aware that they are actually suffering with this problem. Hence, when they are not clear about their problem, so they will never be able to get the cure out of it.
That's true. And
really
it's so disheartening. It's so disheartening and so sad all across the world, because ADHD is so curable. It's actually the most curable psychiatric disorder, if you want to call it a disorder.
So we'll come to that definitely. We'll come to that, Kirti. So second thing what I want to ask you here is that what kind of symptoms does these ADHD people show actually? So why I'm asking this question to you, so that the viewers can understand that either if they are actually suffering from ADHD, that's one, Second, if they want to recognize a few people who are with whom they are surrounded with, or if they can see around them. So how do we actually understand that if a person is having ADHD or no, not what kind of symptoms that does that person show on the face of it? So without doing the diagnosis, without doing that paper pencil test, or without doing any other kind of test, by the habits, by the culture, by the behavior, by the actions, how can we understand that if a person is going through ADHD or not?
Mm-hmm. Fantastic question. So the symptoms of ADHD, first of all, there are three different kinds of ADHD. So the symptoms might depend on what kind it is. So there is an ADHD of the inattentive kind, where the kid can sit still, the person can sit still, but there's a lot of hyperactivity going on in the head. And what that means is they are your typical, they look like fantastic students. They're sitting still, teachers love them, no problems at all. And it looks like they are paying attention, but really they're not, because there's a lot of activity going on in the brain. They are paying attention to 10 different thoughts at the same time. They fail their grades, they don't do well academically. So, it's actually the reason why it's picked up later is because these kids sit still and they're not distracting, they're not disturbing the class. So it's a lot of inattention going on in the head. They're inattentive, they forget things. You tell them something, you tell them, hey, did you brush your teeth? Did you have a shower? Did you finish your homework? Did you do this? And they're like, oh, was I supposed to do it? I forgot about it. Okay. And then they will try to get down at it.
Okay.
The second kind is ADHD, the hyperactive kind. So in this, there will be the motor component of it, which is they will be constantly go, 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 go. They can't sit still. You tell them to sit still, but they will be constantly distracting. They can also have inattention of the brain, but hyperactivity is really the bigger problem here. So they can't sit still. It's actually called ants in the pants, or driven by a motor, driven by a motor. And it's consistent. Consistency is very, very important. That's important. And there's a third kind, which is a combined kind, where they have both inattention and hyperactivity. So they can sit still, and there's a lot of hyperactivity in the head as well. So some of the symptoms of hyperactivity might be something like you tell the kid, hey, can you finish your homework? And 2 minutes later, you'll just see them going around. They just can't sit still. There's a lot of hyperactivity. They will be constantly fidgeting with their pens. They would constantly be playing with things around. They might have some sensory symptoms as well, chewing their shirt, stuff like that. But the biggest symptoms are three symptoms. So it's impulsivity, inattention, and hyperactivity. These are the three big symptoms. Impulsivity, it relates to something like, I can't wait for my turn. I have to blurt out the answer. The teacher asks something, I can't wait for the teacher to call out my name. I just have to blurt out the answer. So those are the big symptoms. But unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
I was going to say that these are the core symptoms, but there are so many other manifestations of it. And what I mean is, for example, the core problem might be inattention. They're not able to pay attention. They're failing at school. But because of it, they might start developing anxiety and depression, because they might think, what's wrong with me? Why can't I focus? And why can't I learn this like other kids? Or younger kids, especially hyperactive, the core problem is they can't sit still. They're going around. The teacher says you're a bad child, and they start developing defiance. Something like, oh my God, everybody's against me. I'm gonna act out. I'm gonna throw a tantrum because nobody understands me.
So I guess you answered very beautifully. You've explained it in a very systemized manner, and you've given really good details that it is not just the hyperactivity thing which is considered to be a part of ADHD, but it can go beyond it. That the person is sitting still and not showing much movements, but there are so many things which are running in the head of that person, and we might not see it. And also, you have gone the extra mile and explained us that the person who is actually going through this is not very happily doing all these things. That person is actually suffering. That person actually needs to come out of it, and that person is also having that anxiety that how do I settle myself, why everybody around me is not understanding me. That person is actually going through a lot of pain. I completely understand. Now I come to the main and final phase of our session right now, what I'm doing it with you, that once somebody has understood that yes, either I am going through ADHD or somebody around me is going through ADHD. So I would request you to kindly explain it to our viewers in a very systemized way, that immediately once we have recognized that that ADHD symptoms are clearly visible, then what kind of actions need to be taken either by the parents who sees that their children is ADHD, or by, let's say, anybody else who sees the symptoms of ADHD in somebody else. So should they go to the doctor immediately, or should they change their eating habits or sleeping pattern or some meditation, or what should be the course of action? And later on, is it possible that can ADHD be totally wiped out from somebody's life, and can it be completely diagnosed, or the symptom still stays?
Yeah, for sure. So once somebody is seeing the symptoms of ADHD clearly, once they know that this might be ADHD, and just on a side note, one thing to keep in mind, there are so many other things that look like ADHD, but they're not ADHD. So it's very important that once you have recognized, once you're suffering, go see a professional, go see a mental health professional, go see your pediatrician, your psychiatrist, whoever it is that is taking care of your health. Go see them and talk to them immediately. And the reason I say it is because people with ADHD will put things off. They know that they are suffering, but they will put things off. So start seeking help. Tell your family members, tell your friends, somebody that, hey, hold me accountable to this. Hold me accountable to the fact that I have to go see a mental health professional, because there's so many things that are not ADHD too. Some people have hearing problems. They can't hear, they can't pay attention. They will get, they might lose focus. So
Okay.
you need to rule out stuff like that. Sleep problems, if they're a big tonsil, sleep problems can cause someone to not sleep. If you haven't slept well, you can't pay attention well. There's so many things that can look like it. And that's the reason why going to a professional can help you narrow down if this is ADHD or if it's something else.
Okay, so first step, definitely what you recommend to other viewers is to seek a professional help, to also rule out other possibilities, that whether for sure it is ADHD or not, and also definitely a professional would take care of it in a very different way rather than a layman. But let's say that is one step, they have gone to the professional, and that professional takes over and guides that person. But let's say now that you are also a professional who's sitting here, and it's our privilege to have you on board. So I would really want that, let's say somebody is really sure that it's ADHD. So what kind of precautions or action they should take at home to avoid it? And do you are you like professionally thinking that you can give them some sense of hope that can it be cured completely?
Great question. ADHD, I wish it could be cured completely. But the way I tell people to look at ADHD is look at it the way you look at diabetes. The reason why we treat diabetes is not to get rid of it, but to prevent the complications of, let's say, neuropathy or losing limbs or high blood pressure. What are the complications of diabetes? To prevent it is the reason why we treat diabetes. Or the reason why somebody wears glasses is not to treat our vision, but to correct our vision. So for the same reason, if you look at ADHD that way, ADHD is something that is because of anatomical changes. And the best we can do is manage it, at least at this point of time. We
Right.
don't have technology like LASIK to get rid of our myopia or vision problems, but at least at this point of time, what we are doing with ADHD is really to manage some of the symptoms. And the important thing to note is ADHD is different for two different people. No two people with ADHD might be the same diagnosis, but they're not the same. Their manifestations are different.
The gravity
How
would be
they
different.
suffer.
Yeah.
Exactly, the gravity would be different. So to family members and to friends, what I would say is understanding and love. So important. If you are open to understanding that there is something going on behind the eyes of this person you're talking to, that if you're open to understanding that there are more things to ADHD than we know right now, the understanding comes, the love comes. If somebody is not listening to you, it's not because they are annoyed or they want to do it, it's because there is something else going on.
Right,
So it's that
right.
understanding which is very, very important. The other thing that families can do, and I tell them this a lot, is time blindness is a very big problem. People with ADHD have executive functioning problems. They have problems organizing. So Don't tell them that, hey, plan for this thing 3 months from now or 6 months from now. Help them out with it. Externalize things. So maybe have timers, have clocks that actually show them that time is passing, time is taken away. They need to do things. Give them tasks that, hey, work on just this page today. Just write 4 sentences of your book report, or just read 1 paragraph of this today. Chunk it down and give them tasks, rather than telling them then, hey, you got to study for this test. Did you study or not? It's going to be extremely hard for them. So work with them, work with and discover their brain style. There are some people who are visual learners, some people who are kinesthetic learners. So learn it, and then come up with projects where you can include their learning style and you can help them learn information. For example, I know there is a doctor right now who has, there's a lot of screen time as far as ADHD is concerned. Just kids in general, this era, we have a lot of screen time right now. So instead of hating screen time for what it is, there are physicians, there are people who are trying to use certain apps to help teach kids skills, video games to teach kids skills on how to function better with ADHD. Wow. rather than trying to avoid it completely. So educate yourself. It's so important. Educate yourself. You're thinking of ADHD, don't just dismiss it. Educate yourself, because somebody is suffering from it.
I understand. I understand. So you've given us the correct knowledge of it. So definitely you've said that it may or may not be cured completely, but it can be managed very beautifully so that the person who is going through it does not suffer, and actually instead of taking it as a weakness, can be used as a strength of that person, and that energy can be channelized really well if that energy is used in the right direction. If the people around are really understanding and give that person enough space to deal with it. So I really understand, Kirti. I guess the people who are watching this video and who has come along with us to this extent to watch this video, they have got really good knowledge and insight about ADHD, that what are its symptoms, how is it caused, and how brain of ADHD people is different from other people. So I'm sure the details what you have shared with them, they will, after watching this video, take this ADHD as a concept very seriously. And apart from that, they also understand that how they can cure it, or rather manage it in a beautiful way, so that the person who is going through it reduces the trouble he or she is facing, right? So thank you
Absolutely.
so much, Kirti, for coming on board with us and giving our viewers such a wonderful knowledge. I'm sure we will have a lot of such sessions keep on coming in for our viewers, and we will slowly and gradually we'll go into the deep insights of ADHD. And in our next video, what we can do is we can cover up one topic, which is one type of ADHD in detail, and make our viewers understand, whosoever is going through it, that how actually they can manage it.
Absolutely. And, before we go, the only thing I wanted to say is people with ADHD can do anything. There are smart people, geniuses, entrepreneurs who have ADHD, and they have succeeded in ways that you cannot imagine possible. So ADHD can be your superpower if you know how to work with your brain.
Absolutely, very well said. I guess you are leaving our viewers on a very positive note, and you are giving them this message, and you're giving them a sense of hope that ADHD is not just a problem. It's not a problem at all, rather. And if it is channelized properly, it can be your biggest strength. And the way you
Yeah,
said that the world has seen a lot of celebrities, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of successful entities who are ADHD and who are channelizing their energy. So, my dear viewers, don't hesitate from reaching out to a professional. And I would want to tell you that below this video, you will see a description where the contact details of Kirti Sivakoti is also present. You will have her email ID and her Skype ID and her other details, so that if you wish to reach out to Kirti, you can definitely have a conversation with her. And I'm really sure that she is more than enthusiastic and more than happy to help you.
yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you for watching. Thank you for having me, Akshay.
Thank you. Pleasure was all mine. And looking forward to have your comments in the chat box. And please don't forget to subscribe to Kirti's and Akshay's channel. Thank you so much for watching.
Take care.